Incoming call.
Done.
These panels
Alrighty everyone, so that was quite the compilation and series of work leading up to this point in present day when this clip is being filmed, and it all started with lowering the subframe down. That was just temporarily mock fit in there to hold the engine up so I didn't have to constantly rely on the engine crane holding it up, so I could also shut my garage. It's also not safe to always rely on a hydraulic jack in case it fails, hence why you use jack stands and stuff like that. Anyway, so lowered the subframe down, got it all dressed up with the two components that had to go on it before going back up in the car, which was just really a front passenger side hard brake line and the power steering rack. That one brake line snakes underneath the power steering rack, so it'd be next to impossible to try and do that while the subframe and steering rack's already up in the car. So I got that just lightly put on the subframe. I didn't bolt anything down because I had to do some adjusting after the subframe was put up in the car. So got that all put up, and it was definitely trickier with the steering rack because the steering rack made the whole thing off balance. It wanted to tilt forward and actually to the driver's side. So it was a great deal of work, and thankfully my father-in-law helped out a ton to balance this thing between two floor jacks and get it slowly raised back. I was going to say lowered back up. Raised back up into the car, and we also had to make sure that the motor mount studs fed nicely into the holes on the subframe because the engine was raised up a little bit, but it was kind of torqued a little bit to the side. I didn't have the load leveler perfectly leveled, but so we had to keep the motor mounts loose. That was a big key, was keeping the motor mounts loose so that we had some play in the direction that the motor mount studs could go so that we could get them fed into the holes on the subframe. So once I got all that in, it was just basically buttoning everything up, torquing all of the bolts down properly, torquing the motor mount bolts down, torquing the subframe nuts down, torquing the power steering rack, getting the brake line plumbed back up, getting the power steering lines put back up, and just a long list of other little things that had to be either reinstalled, reconnected, tightened down, etc., etc. So it was very handy. If you're doing a project as involved as this one, definitely get some type of whiteboard or cardboard and write all the steps down and cross things off as you go, so that way you know you don't forget something, you don't get to a point where you have to undo something to go backwards. So just helps you stay organized. So this has been a huge help to have this list to cross off as I get things done. And as you can see, the list is definitely more crossed off now than it is uncrossed off. So we're getting very close. And so once I got all the pieces connected up related to the subframe, power steering rack, brake lines, things like that, I went in and did the belt. So I got the new belt put on, I got the new tensioner put on, so that all lines up great with the new harmonic balancer, obviously. And then from there, it went on to getting all the suspension transferred over. So one of the big things was had to take the suspension off of the old subframe and then transfer it over to the new one, which is the lower control arms, and then the spindles and upper control arms were all part of that. So I got that all transferred over, and I actually took that time to install a really important upgrade that I filmed in the earlier part of this video. Was there's a company called AMT Motorsports, and they make a stud kit for the upper control arms. And so for those that don't know, there's basically these like threaded inserts that are into the frame of the car. This is the frame rail right here. And so anytime you take the upper control arm off, you're unthreading and threading a bolt into and out of this threaded insert in the frame. Basically, if the threads get jacked up at any point while you're owning this car, tracking it, doing mods, it becomes a real headache. You either have to drill out the thread, do a thread repair, put a high lock kind of thread insert in. So to avoid that, instead of undoing the bolt in and out of that threaded insert in the frame, you actually thread in a stud, which is just like a bolt or a threaded rod without a head on it. You put some red Loctite on it so it doesn't go anywhere, and then you just use some washers, lock nuts, and a hex nut, and then the control arm just goes onto and off of the stud. So it's a great piece to have if you're going to be modifying or tracking or running your Corvette a lot, where you have to adjust your camber with the shims on your upper control arms. I knew at some point I was going to be putting coilovers on this car, so I was going to be taking off the upper control arms again, so I just took this opportunity to get that stud kit because it was like 70 bucks. So it was a really nice quality stud kit, and I actually used my 3D printers over there to 3D print a little kind of fit check tool. So when I threaded the stud in, I printed this little tool, which don't know where it went actually. I've got oh, here it is. So I printed this little tool here, which you guys saw earlier in the video, and this told me that when the stud was threaded that far in, where the end of the stud was flush with this little 3D printed sleeve here, then I knew that was the proper thread length to engage into the frame. And granted, it's a little overkill. I mean, I had the printer ready to go. You could have just took some PVC pipe, cut it at the right length, and done the same thing, but since I have the 3D printers at my disposal, I went ahead and took advantage of that. And that stud kit is a great add-on that probably not many people know about, but it's really important so that you don't jack up those threaded inserts in the frame of the car. Once I had that stud kit installed, that basically allowed me to final install the upper control arms and the shocks. So the suspension was completely buttoned up at that point. I got the steering tie rods torqued back down. I got the anti-sway bar put back in. Got the composite leaf spring put back in, and I did that before I put the upper control arms on. And then today, what I did was I got all the brakes put back on. So the brakes had some pretty gnarly, the spindles, the hubs, and the brake rotors themselves kind of had some gnarly surface rust. So I cleaned that off with a nice wire brush, got that all put back on, got the calipers put back on. I am going to eventually be doing the C6 Z06 brake swap. Otherwise I would have taken this opportunity to put new rotors and pads and everything on, but I didn't want to invest money in that when I'm trying to save for that C6 big brake kit from the Z06. So in summary, we're getting really close. I'd say the last big thing that I have to do is the midsection of the exhaust is still off of the car. So for those that remember, I had to lower this in order to take the starter out, and so I could take the starter out and put that flywheel lockout tool in when I cranked the bolt for the new harmonic balancer down, because the engine just wanted to turn over. So I'm waiting until I can get one of my friends or family members back over here, because trying to hold this thing up and get it bolted down and mounted with just one set of hands is very difficult. It's quite the awkward piece. It's still technically connected to the car because of the O2 sensor wires, so you don't want to like drop it and rip those. So I'm just waiting for the opportunity where I can get someone over here, buy them lunch obviously, and have them help me put this exhaust back up in the car. Once I do that, basically the last thing that I need to do is I got to fill the power steering fluid reservoir back up, because that was completely drained out when I reinstalled everything back in the car, so that there wasn't power steering fluid dripping everywhere. And then the last thing that I'll have to do is at some point when I do that C6 Z06 brake kit, I will do a full brake fluid flush and change, but I have to top off the brake fluid because it actually leaked down quite a bit when I had the one line disconnected from the ABS module. And then I'll have to bleed this brake line here, since I had to take it off, which I'm going to borrow my uncle's vacuum bleeder to make it easy. So we're definitely getting there. Slowly but surely, we're going to finish this phase of the build. It's pretty crazy. This car has been up on these quick jacks since before Thanksgiving. And so it's been quite the process. Granted, a lot has happened. I mean, I put the car up anticipating to just be doing the harmonic balancer, and that was when I found the crack, which reminds me, I want to go show you guys the subframe without all the suspension components attached to it, because you can really see the crack now. So it obviously set me back a little bit when I had to figure out, okay, now I'm going to have to hold the engine up. I got to put my engine crane together. I got to figure out the proper procedure for doing all this. So it definitely set me back a little bit. With the holidays and everything and some family stuff going on, I had to kind of take didn't have a lot of free time to commit to this, but we're getting there. It's going to be a lot of fun once we get this thing back on the road, and can kind of get to the point of doing fun mods instead of this maintenance stuff You know, I've got an exhaust system in the back of the garage here I want to put on. I got the short throw shifter, and then obviously want to 3D print a lot of cool stuff for this car. My mental bandwidth has been so caught up in just getting this part of it done, largely in fact because the car just takes up, and everything in here just takes up the whole garage space. So I'm trying to get this done so I can close this chapter of the Corvette project and then move on to the next one. And I'm hoping, you know, knock on wood here, that all the future stuff related to this build isn't so drastic to where the car is down, or in this case up, for months at a time. It'll be just like maybe 2 or 3 weekends where I'm doing something, you know, here and there, and then in the meantime I can obviously drive the car and enjoy it. So that's kind of my game plan moving forward. But before I end the video, I want to show you guys the crack on the old subframe. Okay, so here we got the old subframe out of the car, and with the lower control arm out of the way, you can definitely see the extent of the crack now. And I'm so glad that, as a doozy of a process this was, I'm glad I found this and replaced it. You can see here this crack, it goes all the way down this wall here and then starts coming across. So basically what would have happened, this crack would have kept growing here and then here, and this whole basically corner of the subframe probably would have just fractured right off the car. And you can see, you know, this, whatever the car hit, like it scraped against something, whether in the accident or when the forklift at the auction yard picked this car up, it definitely scraped something and then probably hit it hard enough to just put a crack in this cast aluminum subframe. So pretty gnarly crack, and obviously that goes all the way through to the top, hence why I was able to see power steering fluid leaking all the way down through and dripping down through this point here. Alrighty, so that's going to do it for this video. I really have no idea how long this video is going to be because I did such a long compilation of just not talking and just filming the work. This video is probably long already, so if you watched to this point, thank you for sticking to the end. I appreciate it. So, like I said, I'm hoping to get to more fun, exciting stuff with the build. I mean, for me, this is pretty, I don't know if fun is the right word, but it's a challenging experience and it's a big learning experience diving this far deep into the car and really just getting to learn the car, getting to learn all the little components, all the lines. It helps you understand the car that much better. So I'm glad to have done it. Did a lot of preventative maintenance while I was in there, motor mounts, belts, pulleys, stuff like that. So it's quite the project, but as you guys saw, that list is getting checked off slowly but surely. So thank you guys so much again for watching. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe for more Corvette content, 3D printing content to come. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.